I'm really into like using AI to create deliberate practice. Like deliberate practice is like, how do we practice the like sub elements of a skill with expert feedback? So we can create practice opportunities by interacting with it. Like interviewing, for example. We now have all the technology we need for you to practice your interviewing skills by interviewing an LLM. We can even do it over voice.
Right.
We can even do it over like what looks like a Zoom call with a real human. And then what's great is I already have an interview coach that can evaluate how well you did in that interview. So we're getting to the point where we can just provide infinite practice. Like this is something we could never do in a live taught course, right? Because we've got 1 or 2 instructors and a number of students. But like now you can practice as much as you want and always have expert feedback. And so I'm really excited about that.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Ignite podcast. Today, we're thrilled to have Teresa Torres on the mic. She is an internationally acclaimed author, product discovery coach, and founder of Product Talk Academy, best known for her book, Continuous Discovery Habits, and for helping teams at companies like Spotify, Capital One, and others build discovery into their weekly rhythm. She teaches thousands of product people how to align business outcomes with real customer insights, test assumptions early, and make discovery a habit rather than a checkbox. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Telling you this before we started recording, but I'm a longtime fan. I mean, I remember reading all of your product blogs. It must have been 15 years ago at this point, back in the early. So it's like meet your hero day here on the Ignite podcast.
Thanks. It has been a long run, but I'm still having fun. So that's all that counts, right?
That's amazing. Yeah. Well, I'd love to get your backstory. What's your origin story?
It's sort of funny. I got introduced to human-centered design as an undergrad in college, and I naively thought that's how business worked. And so I went into my first job thinking like, we're going to be talking to our customers and we're going to be testing our designs and everything's going to be great. And then I very quickly learned that's not how business works at all. I worked at a number of really early stage startups early in my career, and I was really fortunate. I know a lot of people early in their career, they chase the big name logos, and that's valuable too. But I think what I really liked was I got to play a lot of hats early. I got sort of firsthand exposure to business early. And so I've always sort of blurred the boundaries between even front-end engineering, design, product management. It's really influenced the way that I think about the world. And probably after, I think I worked at 4 different companies, and after seeing the same pattern everywhere, I was like, okay, maybe I should just focus on trying to get product teams to talk to their customers a little more often. And so I think, we're in 2025, 14 years ago, I started working as a product discovery coach.
Yeah, and it was not too long after that, probably a year or 2, that I ran across your online musings. Because
nice.
I was entering product around 2012. And it was very much like you said, no one was talking to customers. I worked at Rocket Fuel, which was an ad tech unicorn. And I got there and it was just complete waterfall. I was like, and no product managers were talking to customers. And I used a lot of your teachings and others to say, hey, no, let's actually get out of the building and really talk to people and figure out what their pain points are. And it was just so surprising that it was very much in hindsight like a technical PM role. You just kind of take the requirements from the sales and product marketing teams and you just go build what they tell you to build.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's still very common today. I mean, I remember being blown away when I worked at a startup where our roadmap was our VP of product literally just captured everybody's product ideas into a spreadsheet. And then he just reorganized the rows based on the flavor of the week. And I remember just being blown away that like, really, this is your strategic decision-making? Like, I don't really get it. And so what's good though, is I do think the craft of building products, how we decide what to build is evolving. We've made a ton of progress. It still feels glacially slow, but if we take the long arc, we have amazing tooling. We've made many, many more teams are talking to customers on a regular basis. We're starting to test our ideas. So it is nice to see a little bit of evolution in the industry.
Yeah. How do you advise teams how often to talk to customers? Because a lot of times you figure out the problem, and you're like, okay, now we got to go execute on this. And it's not going to be a 2-week sprint to do this thing. It's going to be a quarter, or 2. What is the right cadence? Does it kind of depend on what you're building and what the kind of the cycle time of what you're building entails? Or how do you kind of advise teams to think about that?
Digging even to your comment about it's not going to take 2 weeks, it's going to take a quarter. I think a lot of this happens because It's so easy to think in big projects. All of business works on it from a project mindset. But I think the real power in product comes from embracing what's often called a product mindset. I like to think about it more as a continuous mindset. It's this idea that like our product is never done. There's never going to be with a project, there's an ending. We complete the project, we're done. With product, especially digital products, like it's always evolving. Like we're never ever done. And so if we instead adopt this continuous mindset, what we have to do is we have to learn how to take these big, giant, monolithic projects and start to think about them more continuously. So how do we break that work up into bite-sized chunks? And of course, we've always been doing this, right? Like engineers work in bite-sized chunks. But the difference with a continuous mindset is we're working in bite-sized chunks where each chunk is valuable to the customer. And that's the hard part, right? So it's easy to say like it's going to take it 3 months to build this thing. And at the end of the 3 months, we'll deliver this really valuable thing to our customer. It's a whole nother thing to say, okay, well, let's take this 3 months of work and think about how do we carve it up in a way that each little piece creates some value to customers. And the benefit of this is it means that we don't have to wait till the end of 3 months to create some value for customers. They're getting value all along. So I think to learn how to do that really well, we actually have to be talking to our customers continuously. We have to understand, instead of thinking about it as like a big 3-month project, we're kind of thinking about it as like, let's say it's 10 9-day projects, or even better, 24.5-day projects. I know there's weekends in there. I'm just trying to make my math easy in my brain. Right? So like maybe it's 23-day projects. And then I think that if we think about it as like we always want to get feedback from customers on our projects, well, now we have teeny tiny projects, so we need to get continuous feedback. And that also is what helps to like make sure each chunk is actually providing some value to customers.
Yeah, I love that. How do you advise, this is very much a startup podcast. We invest in early stage startups, pre-seed and seed, which are basically founder led product teams, right? It's the founder, sometimes just a business co-founder and a technical co-founder. As you're handing off the reins, it seems to me as the organization grows in complexity, it slows it down, right? It slows this continuous discovery process down. How do you advise, founding teams that are starting to grow the product and engineering and design orgs to kind of maintain what they had when it was just a 2 pizza team, as Amazon would say?
Yeah, I think what's hard about startups, and this is where all of my full-time employee experience is like a startup founder is a unicorn in and of it themselves, right? Like they're crazy enough to think that their vision in their head is the right thing, is the right view of the future, and they're willing to bet a lot of their own, oftentimes money, definitely sweat equity into making that vision come into like the near future. And that's amazing. And I feel like good founders have a ton of conviction, and that's a big part of their strengths. The challenge is our strengths are often our weaknesses. And when it comes to discovery, that strength of like, I have this really strong view of the future and I'm willing to bet everything to go after it, makes it really hard for you to see how you're going to get there might be wrong. And so I encourage founders to like have a strong conviction about the future, but be really flexible in how you're going to get there. And this is where like discovery, you might, and actually let's think of a really famous example of this. Dropbox released their like launch video where it was just this picture, like this vision of you have access to your files everywhere. And that sounds so silly now because we've all had access to our files from everywhere for so long. But like when it came out, it was revolutionary. And I mean, I remember before that, like I grew up in the Napster generation. We already had this idea of peer-to-peer and files everywhere, but it was hard, right? Like, and we weren't quite sure if it was safe or let alone legal. Dropbox comes along and they look like this, like they're going to build this thing that is clearly legal, clearly safe, and you can still have all those benefits. And I think it just really resonated. Now, Dropbox had to make a million decisions along the way to make that feature come into reality. And if the founders of Dropbox had been really stubborn in all of those decisions, they probably wouldn't have been successful, right? To get to a successful product, we have to be really flexible in the how. And we probably have to try 400 different ways to get there on a million different decisions. And I think what's hard for startup founders is that sometimes that conviction we have about the future we misapply to the how. And then we build the wrong product because we're stubborn about our view of how it should work instead of our customer's view of how they need it to work. And so I think the first thing is we have to get through that like awkward, how do we separate our conviction? Conviction is good. So we talk about founder mode, but micromanaging in the how can be really problematic. Okay, I think maybe what was behind your original question was this idea of like eventually a startup is going to outgrow the founder being the product manager. And how do we like scale ourselves and how do we make sure that good decisions keep happening? I think, again, it's really important not to confuse those things. Strong conviction about the view of the future while being flexible on the details. And I think we have to really communicate to our teams what is non negotiable about that future vision and then let go of literally everything else. Now, that doesn't mean we can't hold our teams to like a high standard of quality from a craft standpoint and from a design standpoint and from like a taste is the word of the day lately,
Mm.
right? Like, I do think that it is a founder's job to maintain that standard of quality. But I think like the way that we scale ourselves in a startup or not is that we're really clear about the non negotiables, that view of the future, and we're really flexible on everything else because we're going to get the best work out of our teams if we empower them, if we give them a lot of space to go and explore. And what's funny is right now we're going through this period where the industry is like swinging back a little bit. Like there's this push to move back to kind of command and control.
Mm.
I mean, there was even some of that in that founder mode essay by Paul Graham. And like Brian Chesky's even going this way a little bit, maybe not as much as people think. The Spotify guy is definitely going back in this direction.
That's
And I
interesting
think,
because Spotify historically was very agile.
yeah,
They had distributed teams. They all made their own decisions about their kind of part of the stack, and they had this beautiful org structure that enabled the decision making to be pushed down to the team level.
everything's easy in a zero interest rate environment, right? Like this cash is flowing. We can give everybody all the empowerment they want. And then things get scary and our human nature is to tighten up. But I think, again, this distinction between conviction about the future vision versus conviction about the details is a good distinction. Because I think in lean economic times, it's actually, you should be doubling down on that vision and you should be even more flexible on the details because the details are going to change. Like it is impossible for any human or even any set of humans to get it right 100% the first time. So like we have to have flexibility on the details. But I also think like the stronger your vision, the more likely you're going to find the right details. So I do think we are making some mistakes right now. Like we are overreacting a little bit, which is fair. Like the world is in a state right now where we should all overreact a little bit. But I would love to see this stronger distinction between founder mode should be about the vision, the future vision of the product and the quality of standard, the craft. And I think we can still give our product teams the flexibility on that.
How do you make a good PM?
Oh, that's a hard question. There's one word that comes up to mind. It used to be curiosity, and I actually think curiosity is the root of the second word. But the term that people are throwing around a lot, which I think is really important, especially in an LLM world, is agency. And I think that like agency is a word we use a lot. I'm not sure everybody understands what it means, but I think Steve Jobs really captured agency in his quote about, I'm going to butcher the quote, but something along the lines of like, everything that you see in the world was created by a person and you could be that person, right? Like
Love that.
agency is this idea of like, we do impact our future and we do impact the world around us. And the more that we internalize that and believe that, the like more we're able to do. And so I think for product managers, the reason why this is so critical is it's so easy to think like, well, my boss isn't asking me for this. They're asking me for this other thing. So I'm just going to do what I'm told. Well, no, like if you have conviction about this other thing and you think what you're being told is wrong, you need to like communicate that. And again, not stubbornly, right? Like I think one of the hardest things to balance is like we should have conviction and we should be really flexible. So how do we balance both of those things? I will share I didn't always get it right in my career. I definitely learned to like I should either be a founder or I should run my own business because I have a lot of conviction and I didn't always have a lot of flexibility when I disagreed with the founders that I worked with that also had a lot of conviction. And I think that's an important thing to recognize. But I think all of us, even those of us that like don't want to be a founder and we're going to be individual contributors for a lot of our career, this balance of conviction plus flexibility, I think is really powerful. So I think a good product manager has high agency. They just find ways to get things done. They don't, the things I talk about is like when you want to look at change, it starts with yourself. So it's easy to complain about how your organization works, but literally change starts with you. So how do you look at what's in your span of control, what you're contributing to the system that's at play? And then I think related to agency is curiosity. So I think it takes a lot of curiosity to start to envision what the world could look like rather than how it works today.
You've seen a lot over your career, and I'd love to get your thoughts on how AI and large language models specifically are changing product, if at all, because you're on the ground. I haven't been a PM for since LLMs really came out a few years
Yeah.
ago. What are you kind of seeing on the ground in product organizations?
So I'm going to take this all the way back to the 90s. Like I started my career I was in college in the mid 90s. I think I built my first internet product
I think we're about the
in,
same age. Yeah, like I
okay.
started college late '90s. Yep.
Okay. I built my first internet product in the fall of 96. I actually built an Amazon site scraper that then led to me being one of their very first Amazon affiliates, which was super fun.
Nice.
Anyway, at the time, so like I was a freshman in college in 95, 96. And I remember I was at Stanford. They had computer clusters. Like not everybody had their own computer. We were the first year that like everybody checked email. And so we would bring down the mail servers like right after lunch. There was like these points in the day where everybody would try to read their email at the same time. All of this is going to sound crazy to folks younger than us, but there was a time when even email was new. We were all learning how to build web pages for the first time. And I remember we like tracked like when HTML 3.2 came out and then when HTML4 came out. Like I remember when tables were new and then frames were new. And like this was super exciting because every release we were very curious. We were like, well, what else can we do with this? And it felt like a toy. Like in those first few months, it felt like a toy. But a lot of us very quickly turned them into businesses. Like I paid for college by building websites for businesses. And I ran a web hosting company where I basically like paid for hosting, like paid to host to get a dedicated server. And then I resold it as like virtual hosting. And so like what felt like a toy quickly turned into a business. And the reason why I'm going into this in all way too much detail is LLMs feel like exactly the same thing. Like it feels like that exact same vibe of everybody is playing with this as a toy. We're still trying to figure out what does this do? What can we build? Everybody gets excited about every single release. Like Anthropic put something out and people go nuts. OpenAI had their dev day and everybody followed it like the old Mac developer days, right? Like there's all this hype and excitement around it, but a lot of it still feels like a toy. But some of us are starting to push into what can we really do with this? And I feel like that is so fun. Like I know so many people, and I put myself in this category too. We're just reconnecting with what it means to be a builder because it's just fun again. And I think software,
SaaS was feeling pretty stale in the late 2010s. It
yeah,
was
I
just
feel
like
like
getting really developed and not a lot was changing.
tech got a
Yeah.
little yucky. I mean, we've seen it a lot, right? Like all companies are following the same patterns. The political side of tech and like, especially on the national politics scene is just weird. I don't care what your politics are. What's going on is just weird. All the layoffs when companies are doing really well, like that's just insane to me. And so I feel like for those of us that have worked in tech for a long time, like it's not what drew us to this, right? Like what drew us to tech was this vision of the future of like what tech could enable and what tech could change. And I think we lost that. Like I think there was so much money in tech that it started to bring in the folks that were just in it for the money and not the idealists and the innovators. I mean, I'm starting to think of that cheesy Apple ad, but like it resonated with us
Yeah,
for a
the rise of
reason.
the tech bro, basically.
Yeah.
Instead of going to Wall Street, I went to Silicon Valley. I could
Yeah.
make a
And
bunch of
yuck.
money. Yeah.
Right. I mean, I get it. Like I made a good living and having money is very comfortable and it can be life-changing and everybody should have that. Like I'm not saying making a good living isn't a worthwhile thing, but it shouldn't be your primary driver. Like, and especially after you have enough, it definitely shouldn't be your primary driver. And I feel like those early days, this is why I equate it back to the 90s, like those early days of the internet were so fun. And I think LLMs and generative AI is bringing that back. I think it's reawakening a lot of makers. It's also that there's still that greed part. Like I go to LinkedIn and I cannot believe how much snake oil there is. Like there's so much like very surface level people writing about AI like they're experts. And I'm like, I always want to like repost. I'm not this much of a jerk, but I really want to repost and like just put a comment of like, how do you tell me that you've never used AI without telling me you've never used AI? It's like, this is not real. Like you don't just come on. It drives me nuts. But I think what's coming with it is reawakening a lot of people for why they got into tech in the first place. And I don't want to be all Pollyanna-ish either, because I actually have some huge concerns about the amount of power that's being consolidated in a number of small companies. I have some huge concerns about like the crazy investment in data centers and like the impact on the environment. We also had those concerns. I mean, not those exact concerns, but like the internet didn't grow up without its own share of concerns. But I just think it's super fun to be riding this next wave. And I feel really fortunate that like I get to experience this shift, big of a shift in technology, more than once in my life. You know, people equate it to mobile. I call baloney. Like mobile was a shift, but it wasn't a huge shift.
Yeah, it was like more like a new interface, but it
Yeah.
wasn't like a big
Yeah.
platform shift. Maybe cloud a little bit. I think cloud changed startups probably the most in tech, besides the internet and AI, I'd say.
But I think in terms of like impact on the average human, AI feels more like the internet than mobile or even cloud. Cloud on business, I agree with you entirely. But if I'm thinking about like my neighbor across the street who's an optometrist, I think AI is going to impact him as much as the internet did. Whereas I know he's got a phone, does he care?
Yeah. So looking back at some of your formative moments, are there any stories that kind of shape how you see good product management, good product discovery?
You know, it's funny. I learned a lot by what not to do. I can't say that I ever worked at a company where from the top down it was a good product culture. In fact, a lot of my career was advocating for good product culture. A lot of this is because I worked at early stage startups. And I think it's really hard for founders to create a good product culture. I also probably didn't work at some of the best companies, you know, and
Yeah.
some people,
Like the Intuits of the world were really famous for a
yeah.
good product culture, stuff like that.
And actually, some people criticize me for that. They're like, how does she know anything about products? She worked at all these terrible companies. Well, you know, first of all, I don't feel a need to defend myself. But second of all, I'll say that you can learn a lot by learning what not to do.
Yeah, you and me
What
both.
was,
I mean, most of my product experience is at early stage startups, and when I say early, I'm like, I was at like Series A. I think my
yeah,
first product role was at a Series A company, and then wow, that's the Wild West of product.
it is the Wild West. I mean, I was
I was second product hire. The guy before me was hired a month or two before me.
yeah,
They got a
yeah.
guy managing us who's never done product before.
In my first company, I was the 50th employee. In my second, I was the 10th employee. In my third, I was the 23rd employee. And at my fourth, I can't quite remember, but we were around 20 people. I think people grossly underestimate how many startups fail. Like it's not that I picked crappy companies, it's I picked high-risk companies, right? And most high-risk companies fail. And also not all of those companies failed, but that's a different story. Thing is, like, I could have worked at Google. Like, I actually got a job offer from Google at one point. I had plenty of friends that worked there in the late 90s, like when they were less than 50 people. I played roller hockey there. One of my really best friends, like closest friends at the time, was the 6th employee at LinkedIn. Like, I had plenty of opportunity to go work at these places. The thing is, that's hindsight bias. Like, at those times, I had very good reasons not to work at those places. Like, I was a designer, and Google was very adamant that search is just 10 links on a page. It was like the least interesting thing from a design standpoint.
Feed is the design feature, right?
Yeah. Now, I was wrong because they got into all kinds of stuff, but at the time, it was a good decision. So, like, I can't fret about that. Here's the thing, and especially now that I've worked with a ton of companies, including some very successful companies, we see this same dysfunction literally everywhere. So like you mentioned Spotify, they're known really well for the Spotify model and agile teams and cross-functional squads. And there are pockets of Spotify that do that extremely well. And there are pockets of Spotify that really struggle with that. Just like at Google, they're known for OKRs, and there are pockets of Google that are amazing OKRs and outcome focused. And there are pockets of Google that are very output driven, engineering driven, no understanding of the business context, right? Like, we don't have good companies and bad companies. There's too much luck and uncertainty in the business world to be like, oh, you're amazing and you're terrible. We have successful companies, and we have companies that struggle to succeed. We have companies that survive and get by. And then we, of course, have companies that fail. And I think like what leads to a good product culture, so many things have to be in place that you have to have a CEO. And this is the thing that is most often missing. You have to have a CEO who gets it. And not just like, oh, I read Marty Kagan's book and I want to have a good product culture, but like has felt the pain of not having a good product culture and has learned we're a product company first, because any digital company is a product company first, and like is willing to prioritize that and invest in that. And I think historically, our CEOs have come from sales and come from market. Like they're not coming from product. That thankfully has changed. But like historically, that's not where they came from. It's not what they cared about. And so it was really hard to get these companies that would be good product companies. But we're seeing in the last 10 years, like the Stripes of the world, product, Figma, we're talking about founders that have product mindsets. And I think that's started. So it's starting to change, but it does start at the very top, like with the CEO. Do they care about a product culture? And is that what they're prioritizing? And then I think the harder part, like if that's in place, what's really hard is all your middle managers have to also be bought in. So we tend to think about it as like, we got to train our teams that you need to learn some new skills. Yes, that is true. But if you train your teams and then learn some new skills and all your middle managers are still asking for 12-month roadmaps and telling them what to build, nothing is going to change. And so it's actually really hard to build a good product culture unless you're a product founder and you grow your company to be a good product culture. And literally every hire is coming in with a product mindset, which is why we see companies like Stripe. And it's funny that I mentioned Stripe because they didn't have product managers for a long, long time, but they had product-minded employees across the board, right? And so thankfully, like the internet has been around long enough that we are starting to see this. We're starting to see like product native companies, which is very exciting. But I think it's extremely hard for a non-product native company to make that jump.
It kind of reminds me of the good product manager, bad product manager.
Yeah.
I think it was Ben Horowitz.
Yeah.
He wrote that, right?
Yeah.
So maybe we could on the fly brainstorm good product culture, bad product culture.
I think at the root of all of this, of why it's so hard, is like for all humans, all of us, 100% of us, like zero exceptions, it's so easy in our heads to feel like we're right. Right? Like we're right. I have this idea. It's based on my experience.
Yeah, we rationalize. We make a decision and then we try to rationalize like what we've already made up our mind about.
Yeah. And so what's hard, and thankfully the internet makes it possible to see this, we're actually wrong more often than we're right. Even at the best companies, the best product-minded founders are wrong more often than they're right. And the really good ones admit it. They talk about like 80% of our tests fail, right? Like we are like full stop.
I think 80% of the products I ever built, like hardly anybody used and generated no revenue, like easily. I remember spending months on this is going to change the company. And then you release it and like just dead.
Yeah.
Nobody used it.
So like we have to acknowledge that as part of the process. Like we are fundamentally going to be wrong more often than we're right. So then I think the key to a good product culture is how do we learn we're wrong as early as possible so we don't over-invest in the wrong idea. And so that's where like, the earliest like widespread adoption of what some people call discovery, I don't call this discovery, was the adoption of like large scale A/B tests. And I think I'm not poo-pooing A/B tests. I think they're an amazing
step in the right direction. Yeah.
Tool for measurement. Did what we build have the impact we expected it to have? They're a terrible tool for should we build this? Because you have to do all the work before you can even get an answer to that question. Whereas with discovery, I like to avoid building the wrong things. Like that's my goal with discovery is how do I learn as early as possible that my idea sucks? And if we assume most of our ideas are bad, now how do we do as little work as possible to learn whether we should invest in this or not? So that's sort of my framing of discovery. And even that, like we could just stop here because that's what's hard about product culture. It's really hard for humans to adopt this mindset of I'm probably wrong. And that we see that up and down the organization. And all it takes is one person in that like organizational hierarchy to have the view of I'm right, let's just build this. And it all falls apart. So I actually think it's a little miracle when we get companies with good product cultures because it's just really hard.
And there's this mythology around Steve Jobs, right? As like kind of the best product manager ever. And he had a vision and he was willing his vision into the world, but really he was doing a lot of customer discovery, constant focus groups and constantly interviewing customers and asking them and showing them like prototypes and iterating. And
I really like Walter Isaacson's biography of Steve Jobs. Isaacson is clearly obsessed with this idea of like the human that has an outsized impact on the world. And I love his biographies because of it. But he doesn't fall prey to the like single hero myth. I mean, he does a little bit, like that's how he picks his people. But he shows the whole person and their warts and all. And, Steve Jobs was not like he was a terrible manager his first round at Apple. So bad he got fired. And he's criticized a lot for those early days of like Apple would not have existed without Wozniak. And a lot of like the like hardcore engineering nerds are like, what did Jobs do? Now, that's not fair. Jobs was a very, very good salesperson from day one. But he clearly learned a lot in his next in Pixar years. And when he came back to Apple, he was clearly a much better manager. But we also know he still wasn't perfect. And if we talk about like founder mode, I'm sure there's plenty of details that he micromanaged. I mean, that's kind of what he's known for.
Firing
But what,
people on the elevator and things like that.
yeah, but he
Yeah.
was exceptionally good at the two things we talked about. He was exceptionally good about being stubborn about his view for the future, and he was exceptionally good at holding a high standard of quality. Now, he may not have always been great at being flexible on the how, but it turns out no human is perfect.
That's amazing. Well, so walk us through the core habits and continuous discovery habits. What are the hardest to make practical for teams?
Yeah, so the first is starting with an outcome. This is not a new idea. I mean, Stephen Covey wrote in The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, begin with the end in mind. That's all this is, right? Because of
What's
the
the
popular...
outcome you're looking for? What's the business impact?
Yeah,
Whatever it is.
yeah, like
that's
what
it.
is... It's this simple. What does success look like? What are we trying to do? And for a long time, product teams defined success as we built this thing. And so with outcomes, what we're trying to do is shift from just saying we built this thing, which is the output, to getting more into, okay, we have this thing. What impact did that have on the customer? And what impact did it have on the business? So one, like the tagline of my book is, how do you discover products that create business value and customer value? And I would argue it's not that hard to do one or the other. And neither is sustainable if you only do one of the two. What's hard is, how do we do both? And so the first step is we have to get really clear on what does success look like. And this is, I always define the outcome as success for the business. And this really ruffles my UX folks' feathers because they think we should start with the customer. I have a reason for this. Customers have infinite needs, like infinite needs. We could spend the rest of our lives satisfying customer needs and we would never be done. And so when we start with the business need, it acts as a filter on the customer needs on that realm. So we're still customer focused. We're still making sure we're building for our customer and creating value for them, but we're using the business need as a filter so we don't waste our time building the wrong stuff. And actually, I'm going to pick on Google because Google is really great at creating a ton of customer value and doesn't always create business value, which is why Google has a graveyard of very popular products that were then killed.
Google
Right?
Reader. I couldn't believe it when they canceled that. I use that
Google
every
Reader
day.
is the one, right? Like, it's devastating for those of us that used it
I
regularly.
love that. I love that product.
And not only did that product not, for people that aren't familiar, Google Reader was an RSS reader. If you don't even know what RSS is, like, just go learn some
It was a
internet
feed
history.
of blogs, basically.
I mean,
Yeah.
I still use an RSS reader. It created a ton of customer value. It was free. It created almost no business value. And not only did it not create business value, it actually competed with the business value Google needed to create, which was Google doesn't want you to have a feed of all your blogs where you don't have to go to Google and search for them. Advertising in that product was always challenging. RSS is just technical enough. It was never going to cross over to hundreds of millions of people, right? Like, I can see why they killed the product. But what I would argue is, like, why from a product culture did they not start with, okay, this is a cool idea and it's somebody's 20% hobby project in the company, but like, how did it get so big before they realized this is not a good product for our business? So that's, I think, where the outcome comes in mind. And it's funny that I used a big Google example because they're like OKR advocates right now. But then I think the next one is, I think about this as like, we have to learn about our customers so that we can build the right things for them. And actually, I forget which Stripe founder said this, but I absolutely loved it. He tweeted something like, when we're interviewing our customers, our goal is not to learn about our solution. It's to learn about their mental model so that our product matches their mental model. And I remember when I read that, I was like, that is a founder that 100% gets it. So many product teams, when they interview customers, they walk in with a prototype and say, what do you think? And I think we're missing the point of interviewing. When I interview you, my goal is to learn how you think, what you're trying to do, what your goals are, the environment in which you're trying to achieve those goals, how you think about achieving those goals, so that when I build a product for you, it matches your mental model exactly. Because even a little bit of deviation means there's going to be friction and you're not going to use my product. And so that's so the second habit is just interviewing. And I like to see teams interview every week. Just continuously invest in your understanding of the customer, what their mental model is, making sure what you're building matches exactly how they think.
What are some key questions for the founders listening out there that are like, okay, I'm talking to customers. Am I doing it the right way? What should I be asking them?
It kind of depends on the stage you're at. So one of the things that I teach that's in the book is what's called story-based interviewing. So it's this idea of collect a story about past behavior. So if I work at Netflix, I don't like my intuition is to ask, what do you like? What do you like to watch? How do you decide what to watch? Who do you watch with? What device do you watch on? The challenge with these questions is humans, again, 100% of us, are really bad at answering direct questions out of context. And by bad at answering questions, I don't mean you won't be able to answer the question. Your brain will give you a fast answer, but the answer your brain gives you won't necessarily reflect what you actually do. So you might say, well, I like action movies. I typically watch with my partner. I watch in my living room. What you're forgetting is like, yeah, but you also watched Ted Lasso and you watched a documentary and you watched a whatever. And sometimes you watch in bed on your phone, but you don't want to tell me that because you find it embarrassing, right? Like our brain takes these fast shortcuts. We know them as cognitive biases, and they interfere with our ability to give a reliable response. And the way that we're going to overcome that is we're going to keep the person grounded in actual behavior. So I'm not going to ask you what you like about Netflix. That's a purely speculative question. Your brain is going to give you an unreliable answer. I'm going to ask you to tell me about the last time you watched Netflix. And then I can customize this. If I'm on the search team, I can say, tell me about the last time you had to find something to watch. If I'm on the mobile team, I can say, tell me about the last time you watched streaming entertainment on the go. But I'm still asking for a specific story. And then my job as the interviewer is to keep the participant grounded in that story. And that's great if you have a product or you have a product realm or you have a theory of your product. What's hard for founders, like if you're pre-product, a lot of your research should be at the business model canvas level and like understanding customer segments and understanding value propositions. That can be a little bit different. You might do a little bit broader, more exploratory interviews, but I'd still try to keep it really grounded in real behavior. So I might do something like, tell me about your full day, tell me about the last week. So it might be a much broader scope, but it's still grounded in actual behavior.
So let's take this from the VC angle, right? So
Yeah.
I'm evaluating founders all the time. Put your, I don't know, your LP hat on now.
Yeah.
And how should VCs be assessing founders' ability to do customer discovery?
I mean, if you want to have deals, I don't know that this should be high on your list. Most people are bad at discovery. Like, I wish I could say it was different. I mean, my book has been out for 4 years now, over 4 years. People long before me have been writing about this. Like, these are not old, they're not new ideas. They're fairly old ideas. But
Starting probably with like Steve Blank, 4 Steps, to
even way
Epiphany.
before that, right? Like
Yeah.
a lot of this work is really grounded even in like human factors from like physical products, like that dates back to like the 50s and the 60s. So like these aren't new ideas. Again, what's hard is that we feel right in our head. And like if you're investing, like especially if you're doing like seed investing and even Series A investing, like I would argue the most important thing is how much conviction does this person have? And are they going to run through walls to make this happen? Right? Like that's the most important thing. Like, I don't know that I would look for that flexibility we talked about in that early stage, which is hard because, I mean, you tell me, I would guess more startups fail because the founders don't have enough conviction.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
probably the number one reason.
Right?
Yeah. Either one or both or all co-founders decide to quit.
Like in
Yeah.
my ideal world, like my little idealist view, we would look for founders that had that conviction and had really good discovery habits. But like, I don't know that that human exists. Now, if I'm a Series B investor, Series C investor, and we're talking about companies that are starting to scale and they're turning into real businesses, I absolutely want to be looking at like, okay, you founder may not have this skill. Have you brought in a head of product that has this skill? So I think it really varies by stage. I mean, I know so many early stage investors talk about you're making a bet on the team. And I think that's true. Like the product, even what the company does might change 17 times. But I think the question is will they run through walls is way more important.
Yeah. And why are they going to run through walls?
Yeah.
That's the interesting part, is trying to figure out why. Let's talk about Product Talk Academy. What is that? How did it start? How has it evolved? And what are you kind of learning by running that community?
Yeah. So when I went out on my own, I started like almost everybody did. I just started as a consultant. And one of the things, I actually didn't make a conscious choice to go out on my own. I had been a startup CEO. I was not the founder. That's a weird situation. I don't always recommend that. I became the CEO in the '08 recession. We sold recruiting software. I don't recommend any of this path. It was really hard, like extraordinarily hard. And I ended up leaving that job right around the time where we closed a like asset sale. So that company kind of got bought as an asset sale. And I left and I was really burnt out. And me leaving was even political. Like I had some ethical disagreements with my board. So like I actually left about 6 weeks before the sale closed. And it was just yucky. And I
Mm.
was not ready to get a new job, but I also was not financially independent. So I needed some income. And I had a board member, I'm pretty sure this is how it played out. Like I had a board member that had my back because I resigned on a Friday and on Monday I started getting phone calls about jobs. And I was not a somebody at that point, right? Like nobody had heard of me. I'd worked at 4 startups you've never heard of. Like it was just, I remember waking up on that Monday and getting those phone calls and being like, oh, this is how Silicon Valley works. Okay, somebody is helping me out here. I get it. And so I started taking phone calls and I actually just was so burnt out. I had this like pit in my stomach of I can't go do this again. But I didn't know what the answer was. And so what I did was when companies started calling me, I asked them, I said, can I just do some research projects for you? And I actually started doing like user research as a consultant. And I didn't love it because I really believe that product is continuous. And I was like, I'm just handing you some research and walking away, and you're no better off as an organization. And so I slowly started asking those companies, like, I will do this research for you, but you need to send your product teams along with me so that I can teach them how to do this. So that at the end of this engagement, your teams can do it on their own. And that's what led to my coaching practice. And so for probably about 10 years, no, not even that long, probably for 6 or 7 years, I coached teams. And I started by coaching product managers. By the way, there were not product coaches at the time. I know now there's like 1,000 of them. I think 7,000 of them. I'm positive, like I searched for product coach on LinkedIn and there were 0 when I started. And I wanted that framing. I was like really into this, like create your own category. I wanted that framing because I didn't want to do the work for companies. I wanted to enable companies to do the work themselves. I mean, there were coaches, there were executive coaches. So like coaching was a thing, but not at the product team level. And so I started by coaching product managers. Some of my earliest companies I just found through like personal connections. I got pretty lucky. And then I realized like it's not enough because a lot of the challenges product managers were having was with their cross-functional peers. So then I moved into team coaching. I did extremely well as a product team coach. A lot of that is because I met Marty Kagan pretty early on. I get a ton of referral business from SVPG. I'm eternally grateful to Marty for that. But I also started to see, like, I got to the point where like I had a 6-month waiting list, a year waiting list. And I was like, okay, this is great for me personally, but it's not the best way to scale my impact. And so I started to think about like, how do I make this more scalable? And because I'm a product person, I just started to think about it from a product mindset. And I started to experiment with online courses. It took a long time to get online courses right because it's very different to have someone on a phone call who can help you versus having a curriculum that you kind of have to go through. And there's the teacher, but you're not in the context of your own work. And so through the Product Talk Academy, we have trained thousands of people. I think we are over 18,000 students now. We've worked with people from over 100 countries, over 3,000 companies. Like it's mind boggling. And what's fun is, especially now with AI, like I'm starting to build AI teaching tools. And what AI teaching tools unlock is I get really clear visibility into student outcomes. So now like 14 years in, I can now scale the impact I'm having and actually really measure the impact. So I can see in week 1, students came in and their interviewing skill was here. And by week 5, it's moved the needle so much amount. And so today we have our flagship program, which is called Product Discovery Fundamentals. It's our introductory course. You get introduced to all the discovery habits. Historically, we've offered what are called deep dive courses. These are like, they're about a single habit. I just decided to sunset all of those courses. And it's not because they weren't doing well. It's because I think AI is going to completely disrupt the way that we train. And so I kind of burned the ships to force myself to reinvent what the future of
I have a
training looks
portfolio
like.
company that helps professors using AI make coursework more engaging.
Yeah.
It's a company called Advisor.
I'm really into using AI to create deliberate practice. So how do we deliberate practice is like, how do we practice the like sub elements of a skill with expert feedback? So we can create practice opportunities by interacting with, like interviewing, for example. We now have all the technology we need for you to practice your interviewing skills by interviewing an LLM. We can even do it over voice.
Right.
We can even do it over like what looks like a Zoom call with a real human. And then what's great is I already have an interview coach that can evaluate how well you did in that interview. And so we're getting to the point where we can just provide infinite practice. Like this is something we could never do in a live taught course, right? Because we've got 1 or 2 instructors and a number of students. But like now you can practice as much as you want and always have expert feedback. And so I'm really excited about that.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so we're keeping our fundamentals course as is because a lot of big companies use that to like get people to level 1. Our deep dives used to be like our 201 series, but I'm going to replace all of that with AI driven
Yeah. Well, you have all
training.
the content, and now you just have to
Yeah,
kind of structure the delivery using AI and voice and
exactly.
interactivity. And yeah, that's amazing. What are you excited about besides that in the coming years?
To be honest, it's enough. It's remarkable to me. Like I've shared a little bit of this story publicly, but like before March of this year, so before March of 2025, like I was a consumer of AI, just like all of us. I've been using ChatGPT, I think since December of like the month after it came out. Busy. I'm running a company of 1 and
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
didn't have time to really dive deep. But in March, I broke my ankle. I had to have ankle surgery. I literally was on the couch for 3 months. And I decided to use that time to like dive deep on AI. And I'm doing it on 2 paths. I'm building AI products now to support my courses, but I'm also forcing myself to like change everything I do in my business. So from like a day-to-day operations standpoint, Claude Code is just such a remarkable product, even if you're not an engineer. The way I'm starting to think about it in my head is I am basically building my personal operating system. And in the month of November, all of my blog posts on Product Talk are going to be Claude Code recipes because I feel like this product unlocks so much productivity for me that I really want to start showing the world like what is just now possible. And then it's funny that I use that phrase because I do have a new podcast where I interview teams building AI products.
Great.
And where this came out is I started building my first AI product and I was like, I don't know how to do this. Who am I going to learn from? And there wasn't a lot out there. There's a lot of snake oil. Like there's lots of people writing about how to build with AI. But if like you dig a little deeper, they're not actually building with AI. And so the goal of the podcast is I interview cross-functional product teams. So the builders themselves about their AI products. And it's super fun. So
That is really cool.
I'm all in. I'm all in on the AI.
Yeah.
Even if it's a bubble, I'm just riding the wave.
Well, when companies are adding billions of dollars of revenue like Anthropic is right now in a matter of months, I don't know if it's a bubble.
It's not PetSmart, I can tell you that. Not PetSmart, pets.com. Sorry, PetSmart, you're a real
Pets.com.
business.
Webvan.
It's not Webvan and pets.com. There is money to be made here. I actually worry more about OpenAI, just the amount of money they've raised and the amount of money they're spending.
Yeah.
Like, Anthropic
I do
feels
fear
like
for
they're a
OpenAI
little
as
more.
well. We could look back and they're like the CompuServe or the AOL
Yeah.
of AI, right? So they
Yeah.
they have a big target on their backs. They got to stay ahead. I mean, the
Maybe
new Sora
even the
model is
Yahoo,
amazing. What's that?
right? Like the Yahoo, like they're
Yeah, they
They're
could end up
killing
being
it.
like the Yahoo. Yeah.
they're killing it, but is it sustainable?
Right. Yeah. And, like if you're an investor in the late 90s and, Larry and Sergey come along and you're like, well, isn't there like 16 other search engines?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, there are.
it's a
They're just all
challenge.
bad.
And maybe there's another foundational model company none of us have heard of yet that's going to blow everybody out of the water. So
What I would be worried about if I worked at any of the foundational labs is open source models are starting to get really
yeah,
good.
the Chinese, the DeepSeek stuff. Yeah, that is
Yeah,
dangerous.
they're just getting really good. And then if that's your business, and we're starting to see this, look at both. I mean, Gemini has always been this way, but Anthropic and OpenAI are pushing hard into the like consumer and productivity apps. Like
Yeah.
they're getting more into the like use case stuff, and I think it's because the writing's on the wall. The model itself will start to become a commodity.
Right. It fades into the background like the cloud. It's just kind of
Yeah.
there, right?
Yeah.
And it's undifferentiated. And now you got to actually build things that people that find valuable. Let's wrap up with some quick rapid fire.
Sure.
One question that comes to mind is, the changing nature of product given AI. Like, how are you like? I asked this earlier, but I'll kind of say like, how do you like in your crystal ball looking forward in the next 3 years as AI becomes part and parcel to how we're doing everything? How do you see it changing product and maybe blending the roles of product managers and designers and engineers and so forth?
I think part of the reason why I embrace such a like continuous mindset is because I've learned you can't predict the future. I can share but I also believe in the William Gibson quote, which is the future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed. And so if I look at like the people right on the edge right now, I think that's a great way to think about what's coming. I do think your title is going to matter a lot less. I think your ability to have agency and be a builder, no matter what your background is going to be really critical. I think there's this skill. This is a lot of what my blog posts are going to focus on in November. There's this skill of like learning how to use LLMs well. And like what's going to be required to use LLMs well will evolve as the technology evolves. But there's like some fundamental skills. And I don't just mean prompt engineering. I mean this idea of like understanding context windows, understanding how to get the right context in at the right time, understanding how to break complex tasks down in ways that an LLM can excel at the individual pieces when they struggle at the big complex task. There's like these fundamental kind of like understanding the technology part and then learning how to use it really well that I think will probably be evergreen. And I think it's really easy to think those sound like engineering skills, but I see lots of non-technical people learning those skills. Like some of the best marketers right now, people with no coding skills, are like automating everything they do so they can do like 400 campaigns instead of one campaign. That is awesome. So I do think that like agency and curiosity become even more important because this technology, when you learn to use it well, I mean, we talk about 10x engineers, and I hate that term, but I
Why
have
do you
a
hate that term?
feeling it's a little bit too close to the like hero man, the like single man
Mm,
hero myth for me.
mm.
And don't get me wrong, I have worked with engineers that have had outsized impact, and I do think the best engineers are qualitatively different from most engineers. So like I get what's behind that term. I also hate that everybody thinks they're a 10x engineer, and some
Yeah.
people have the gall to like label themselves a 10x
Does a
engineer.
10x product manager exist?
There are product managers that have had 10x impact, right? So like I guess I struggle with applying it to the person. It's like you can have 10x impact, but I don't know that that makes you 10x
If you have
better.
the right tools and the right training, you
Yeah.
know, like from
Yeah.
product
And
talk, right?
and I think what's really key, work in the right environment. Like I think we grossly underestimate like matching the person to the right environment. So someone that struggles in one environment could really excel in another environment. And so I think that's the part we tend to leave out when we talk about 10x engineers. Like you have a 10x impact in this environment, but you may not in this other environment.
Well, I could talk to you for another hour, but I want to be cognizant of your time. Where can folks find you online?
Yeah, so I blog at producttalk.org every Wednesday, long form article, usually about discovery. These days I've been writing a lot about AI, but always with that discovery flavor. So how do we keep it customer centric? And then I have a new podcast. You can find that at justnowpossible.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.